Hey, good evening. It's Friday evening, March 4th, 2022 at about 7:18 p.m. my time, and it's been a rough day. But not nearly as rough as the folks that are living in the Ukraine. I'm starting to begin to feel like Scully from Avatar, doing these videos. Seeing a huge influx of people checking certain things out, a lot of information, not information, but feedback, I should say, um, that is really extraordinary on so many levels, and also, disconcerting on some other levels. But I mean, the world is crazy, and I just felt like chiming in here. I was kind of thinking about giving it a break today, but because I'm kind of fried, honestly. I'm not just fried doing these videos, but just fried thinking about what it is that I have in context of what's going on in the world and how difficult it is to penetrate not just regular people who've actually been on the downside of corruption, whose lives have been destroyed by it, and who still don't understand what actually happened to them, but just in general, people that are asking questions in media. Jon Stewart, that is seeking answers in multitudes of what we have. We have literally all the answers he's missing, and that's another version of frustration for me. And I'm going to continue to try to get his attention because I think he's a good guy. But I'm in media and I understand how these things go. I mean, people have their own kind of verticals and their own like little sandbox. And Jon Stewart is literally asking questions we asked 13 years ago. And it's great that he's finally getting around to it. But he's doing exactly what we did. He's going to high level people that are in the system that he expects to get straight answers for them to tell him how it works and when they've been in the process of the cover up the whole time. It's like hide the flag. I feel like I'm in elementary school, and it's just insane. And yet we have the answers. And again, penetrating his gatekeepers, Stewart, everybody on social media. There's such an influx of information, and yet another day goes by where we live in the kind of the insanity of what feels like Groundhog Day to me. So, and I mean literally, because like tonight, and what prompted me to actually push record on this when I was actually dead set against it tonight, but I have to go for it. It was basically I felt compelled after watching a little bit of mainstream media this afternoon and this evening, and coming across Sean Penn, who I respect immensely, and I like Sean Penn a lot, and but he is Sean Penn, and he was on with Anderson Cooper this evening, talking about his correspondence, his front row seat to being in the midst of what's happening in the Ukraine, and I felt like it was Iraq all over again. I mean, I saw Anderson Cooper and Sean Penn basically doing the same thing, however many years ago that was. I mean, we're talking 2022 now, and we're talking what 2003, 4, 5, somewhere in that vicinity. I mean, it's my God, how long ago was that? But yet we're still in the same madness. And Cooper and everybody else in mainstream were talking about like the go-to thing with President Zelensky today is like please West enforce a no-fly zone. And I'm thinking to myself, well, one, that would be insane because it sounds to me like Putin has got his itchy fingers and maybe losing, some marbles along the way, and maybe he's not the grand chess champion that I thought he was, and he's making a lot of mistakes. But still, the Russians have overwhelming forces against Ukraine, and if he needs to escalate and it becomes some sort of nuclear conflict, I mean, this whole situation with the fire and this huge nuclear facility, I think the second largest in all of Europe, and I mean, it just things are getting dicey, right? And but I'm thinking about this no-fly zone situation. I'm thinking to myself, what would have happened during the Iraq War if Russia did that to us? I mean, it would have certainly escalated the hostilities. And Ukraine, with its proximity and its history and everything else, is more akin. I mean, it's not a direct analogy, so please don't take this literally. But I mean, it's like, what if the Texas had seceded from the United States, which they're always threatening to do anyway, and I'm from there, and I certainly understand the Lone Star State mentality. But what if downstream Texas had seceded and the United States decided, well, we want it back? I mean, at least geographically, I mean, it wouldn't be that far away from reality in terms of how close Ukraine is and everything that's involved. But really, what it appears to be the whole conflict for me, and this is what I can't quite get my head around, is the nature of fossil fuel, how important natural gas and the monopoly is for Putin and Russia, particularly as it relates to its own currency. If you can trade in your own currency based on having monopoly for natural gas in Western Europe, then no matter how much the ruble is devalued, you've got that. And so if you corner that market and you corner maybe rare earth minerals and all of the other sorts of natural resources that Ukraine has under the Russian umbrella, then maybe that offsets the risk that Putin took by the global runs on the Russian economy and, of course, the destruction of their currency. I mean, it's incredible what's happened in the last few days. But I'm sizing all of this up, and I'm thinking about the celebrities and the outpouring of support for Ukraine and just a whole lion's share of information, and it's to be expected, I guess, in many, many ways. I'm not trying to be cynical at all or jaded towards this whole thing, although it just seems like a step and repeat of things that we've all gone through before, I don't know, in our lifetimes. And, like I said, seeing Sean Penn and Anderson Cooper do the same thing that they did during Iraq, it just felt so familiar to me and kind of put me in a strange headspace. But, again, the world that we live in is really puppeteered by international corruption, of which our country is at the apex of. Okay? So, for example, 2 days ago, I think it was, David Sirota, the co-creator of Don't Look Up. I think most people would probably recognize him from that, although he's been, in the forefront of progressive politics for a long time. He's a journalist, and he was also, I think, communications director for Bernie Sanders, and he's been in the Beltway for a long time. But he did a great piece the other day, which I happen to preface on one of these. But it was about, look, it's Wall Street standing in the way of sanctions because they've got a lot of shared interest with these oligarchs from Russia that are involved with all sorts of private equity and hedge funds and all of those types of things, so that these sanctions probably have as many holes in them as Swiss cheese, right? And so you think about that in the context of why Putin moved, and if he's cornering the market because of fossil fuel and what that means for the empire, and strategically he's talked about this stuff since really the breakup of the Soviet Empire. Tries to reconstitute either it's the Russian Empire, if you want to go back to the Romanovs, if maybe that's more akin to where Putin is versus Stalinist Russia and the USSR. However that shakes out, but with China and everything that it's doing, I mean, I consider over and over and over what the whole purpose of why it is that I'm coming to you, and I continue to try to get this message out there. Where are all the celebrities about the corruption of the United States? I think about Matt Damon. The guy's done unbelievable work in documentaries. He was the voiceover for Inside Job, which won the 2012 Academy Award for Best, maybe it was even earlier than that, for Best Documentary that really was almost light years ahead of its time. I mean, that documentary got really it all right, but then it ended up placing a lot of the blame in academia because it couldn't get past the front door of how this works on Wall Street. I shouldn't say it didn't get past the front door. It certainly squared what Wall Street was doing in a very, very insanely intelligent way, considering it was immediate to the 2008 Great Financial Crisis. In fact, the director Charles Ferguson wrote a book called Predator Nation after the fact that I know didn't find nearly the audience, but really that work was what it was all about. Predator Nation was the super truths that he missed for Inside Job, and yet that fell on deaf ears because the system is that corrupt. Okay, I'd like to talk to Charles Ferguson one day about, hey man, what happened to Predator Nation? I mean, you just won the Academy Award, and the revelations that you put in that book should have basically shell-shocked the entire country, and yet you could have heard crickets, right? Because we're still in the digging out and the aftermath and everything else. But the point I'm trying to make, and words can never keep up with what's in my mind and the way my brain synapses fire off, is Jesus, Sean Penn and Anderson Cooper and every celebrity under the sun that is reacting to the revulsion of this war and everything in the context of Zelensky calling for NATO to actually do what NATO is supposed to do. I mean, isn't that the whole point? If you really think about it, what he's saying is exactly why NATO would want Ukraine inside the umbrella of NATO and would provide air defense, among other things, right? And he's basically calling the West out for being cowards, for not living up to his agreements, I suppose, or whatever the actual agreement is to be a part of NATO. And he's right. But at the same time, it should tell you all you need to know about the whole situation in the world that we live in. Would we want to risk nuclear war? Based on Russia's involvement with the Ukraine, based on everything I just said, I don't think so. And do we want to go send troops and fight for Ukraine right now, as horrific as it is? I don't think America would have the stomach for it. Me personally, I'm in the fight to battle for the soul of the United States, to get us back to a life, liberty, and justice for all based on the integrity of law and equality and all those things that we're supposedly supposed to be, but we're not. And so, like Sean Penn, how about come on board a crusade with me, man? Literally, Tom Morello, where are you? You want to rage against the machine? This is the freaking machine, dude, that we have unpacked and undressed, soup to nuts. In the con, www.thecon.tv. And it's amazing because you have to have people understand the significance. Bombs falling in the Ukraine, troops, hammering it, in the immediacy of the images of people that are, dying and suffering and all of those things. It's horrific, and that's what war does. But what I'm telling you is our corrupt financial system did that in a slow burn to the United States in ways that the numbers are, I think, catastrophically larger than, quite frankly, our deaths in Iraq, the Iraq War. I don't even know what our deaths were up to in Afghanistan and Iraq, but, I know that, Syria and the civilians and the Iraqis and the Afghanis and all of that stuff are north of 1 million. I don't know how many troops we lost in that battle or in those wars, but I can tell you that there were literally 16 million filed foreclosures that led to devastations and divorce and suicides and homelessness and, basically pensioners having their lives stolen from them, and this just horrific madness based on crime. It's a street crime. It's racketeering and corruption. It's the mob, okay? And they puppeteer everything. Just because they wear suits and they come from the Ivy League and, they go to the right, private clubs and everything else, they're acting with LLC in plausible deniability and cleverness. I mean, this whole thing with Bernie Madoff, if you guys remember that name, where supposedly, and the New York Times has said this like 100 times, they said he was the largest Ponzi scheme in history. First of all, I know personally because I've been involved with investigating the Bernie Madoff madness, and it's a lot bigger and a lot more involved than anything that's ever come through with HBO's film and the documentaries and everything else. It's huge, but it's a freaking tiny morsel compared to what created the 2008 Great Financial Crisis and everything that's happened since. In terms of Ponzi schemes, there's nothing even close to it. And again, the devastation was just ravaged the world. And I don't know what else to say. I don't know what it's going to take to make people realize what's actually happened to us. And that all of these other things, whether it's, Ukraine and everything that's going on there, I mean, it's disastrous. It's real. The suffering is real. The people are real. The fact that it could lead to World War III is real and all this insanity. But what's really insane is the fact that our country is so lost that we have no idea what we are. We have no idea how we became this way. We have absolutely no idea how to fix it. That's what people ask me all the time. You know what? I know how to fix it. I'll say it again and again and again. Watch the goddamn con. Sorry. Watch it to learn how this whole thing works, and then we can get together on the same page. I'm calling it the resurrection. I don't know what else to say. Please like and share and subscribe to Patrick Lovell Truth Bombs the Con. Please hashtag Jon Stewart, what we did yesterday and the day before. We've got the answers he's looking for. That's part and parcel to getting the audience out there. If you know anybody who lost their house in the 2008 Great Financial Crisis, if you know anybody, in fact, a lot of people were so shamed about this, they never let anybody know. If you know anybody who would commit suicide or divorce, let them know that we were all completely set up and these bad guys got away with the crime of the millennium. I know that there was a great documentary by Alex Gibney on HBO called The Crime of the Century, which was about the opioid madness and the Sackler family. And that's another part of this. That's insane as well. and they got away with literally murdering, with intent because of how this whole thing went down. I don't know, hundreds of thousands. I think it was 400,000 deaths, something like. I mean, the collateral damage is insanity. It's insanity of this corporate corruption that has overrun our country, and yet we're going freaking nuts about the immediacy of war. And I get it. I get it. Anytime you see body bags, anytime you see people suffering and women and children having to run for their lives. I mean, it's freaking horrific. But I think it's all part and parcel to this piece that I'm talking about also. And I would love to see us as animated, as outraged, as motivated, as together, as we do for a war across the world that, if we got involved, would lead to World War III, which would be an absolute monumental mistake when we live as a corrupt society. I mean, literally, what are we fighting for? Liberty and justice for all. We're fighting for democracy. We're fighting for bullshit. No, we're not. No, we're not. In the systemic racism in prisons and all of the other type of stuff that come. I mean, come on. Have you guys ever noticed, and I'm going to try to finish off with this, have you guys ever noticed that white people that go to the same churches that might have some sort of kind of like, I don't know, orientation that might be a little bit susceptible to, let's call it, I don't know, white supremacy, how organized are they? How ambitious are they in comparison to all of the people that, claim liberty and justice and democracy and principles, but all of the people that literally are educated and really have humanistic values live in silos. They're not understanding the problem. They don't care about the problem. And I'll tell you the last piece of this, and this is what I got to finish off with. The smartest people in our country tend to be professionals. They're the highest educated. They end up making the most income. They have been insulated. We have pacified the top 10% of this country with the fraud that undergirds this whole thing. And they're just looking around like, what's the problem? Right? Even though markets have made like major runs in the last week, I think, all of the markets dropped like 20% today, or 200 points and that sort of thing. Anyway, I could go on and on and on. Corruption is the center tumor of everything. Until we fix that, we can't fix anything.